Welcome to this edition of When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, a discussion of sustainable living and what that means to you and me. I'm Jay Warmke.
And I'm Annie Warmke.
You are. And
Yes.
Today we're going to talk about big ag, or you load 16 ton. What do you get? Oh, that's horrible, isn't it? So it just reminded me, this whole big ag thing it's a factory. It's like I don't know, slavery. It's the old coal
Colonization.
Okay, well, now that we're completely turned off every farmer that's ever heard
That's
of us.
right. Everybody just tuned out. That's right.
So what are we talking about when we're talking about big ag? Let me and here we're going to be talking about plants at the moment. This particular episode we're talking about corn, soy, wheat, rice, the traditional big
Sugar.
Sugar. Well, thank you, honey.
God.
All right. So, Annie, you define it. Jump in there.
All right. Well, I don't know what to say. I mean, the thing is, if I think about what is big agriculture, think of a big factory. And that's what it looks like. So it's making maybe one thing or two things and making a lot of it and just the repetition of it. So the people running it are given instructions by the big corporation like the grain providers or Monsanto or DuPont or whatever. And then that's the way it's going to be operated. So the person running it doesn't grow their own food. They only grow this commodity. Their main skill sets are they understand the seasons, and they may know how to repair the equipment. They understand how the U.S. Department of Agriculture runs and the programs that are available to help them actually try to make a profit. As some of the farmers told me, they might bring in $46,000 a year on average, which is true, but it takes $52,000 to pay their bills.
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit, because I think most Americans have an antiquated or maybe a false sense of what a family farm is. We have this kind of almost Fisher Price, with the little red barn and the animals.
Well, that's the picture that's above the dairy section and the meat section in every grocery store. Is this 1940s
pushing
farm
a plow
guy
through the field and chewing on a piece of hay.
But it hasn't been like that since the 1930s.
So one of the problems that farmers have always faced is it literally is a feast or famine kind of industry where one year you have a good crop, and if you have a good crop, chances are your competitors, the other farmers, have had a good crop as well. And then there's an abundance of produce, and so the prices fall. So you had a great year, but you can't get a price for your product. Then the next year you have a terrible year. Prices are high, but you've got nothing to sell. So it's a constant battle.
But it's so much more complicated than that. For example, if you're any size farm at all, so anything under like the kind of farming that we do, you're going to buy crop insurance from the Farm Service Agency.
But you're getting ahead there, because what I'm trying to get to is why all these programs were developed.
Well, because every farm was supposed to get bigger and bigger and bigger, grow more with less, and have bigger equipment, and this all feeds corporate America.
So this was part of the evolution where, because the farmer was in this feast or famine kind of situation, the government decided to step in and say, all right, we're going to try and level this out year to year by purchasing some of your excess crops, feeding them back out during years when there's not as much, subsidizing some of your activities, paying you not to grow things.
Yeah, but this hasn't been recently.
I know, but this is the way it developed actually from the 1930s until probably the 70s.
Right.
Then 1970s came along, and Earl Butz, who was Secretary of Agriculture, and he came along and essentially said, get bigger or get out. That was.
And we're going
to
feed the world. And this is the mantra. This is absolutely the mantra that most large farm producers, so they're not called farmers anymore. They're farm producers by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And this is what their mantra is. We're going to feed everybody. And it's just such false marketing. It's unbelievable. Incredibly false marketing. And so some of these companies have merged and they've gotten bigger, and farm equipment is $1 million for a tractor now that runs by itself on a computer. One of the things that I see as somebody who sits on the Farm Service Agency committee, which is in almost every county in the United States, has some form of farm service agency, and that is the local branch of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They're sitting there waiting on the insurance that they're going to purchase. They're waiting on a deal, like they have these microloans right now where you can buy bigger equipment or a solar array can be installed. So there's this amazing connection to the government and debt. And this has led us to be in a place where we do things like buy wheat from Russia, globalization. And I'm not wandering down a cul-de-sac here when I say this.
I didn't even mention that.
No, I know. I was waiting on it. But the reality is that this process that started to evolve back in the 20s and 30s, where government was going to step in and kind of even out how farmers earned, what ended up happening is that, as we discovered in our research for this program, that every time there's a corporate farm, there are 5 small farms.
No, 10.
10. Okay, 10 small farms that go out of business.
Right. Well, what ends up happening, and you've kind of alluded to, is the farmers no longer really look at their crop as their profit center. Really, it's all government programs that generate the profit. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't.
Absolutely,
they wouldn't make the decisions they make,
and they wouldn't have any profit because they have a huge amount of debt. Most large farms have a lot of debt.
Right. So the system has been set up and has evolved to the point where the only way you can make ends meet is to get big. You have to go into massive amounts of debt, which the government encourages, almost forces farmers
they have
to go into.
Low interest and insurance.
And the insurances and essentially the programs are in place to provide break-even or profit for these. So it's a welfare-based
absolutely,
industry.
Absolutely. And so here's the thing. So there's recently been the U.S. Department of Agriculture released the 2017 census, the last one was 2012. And it shows that the average farm size in this country is 441 acres, which is an increase of about 1.6% from the last census. The number of large farms, which they consider large farms to be 2,000 acres or more, increased by 6% in the last 10 years. So the number of 1 to 9 acre farms, which is where we really ought to be if we want to make real food production affordable and healthy, is 17.3%. So those small farms are increasing. Those are the farmers, and particularly women-run farms, that don't have debt, that raise more on less land, are more sustainable in their practices, work together as a community. When I look at where we are, the other challenge is that the average age of these farm producers is 57.2 years. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with the fact that young people have to be brought into the farming industry, and that's what it is. And we've got to do better with minorities and women who are going to do better with how they use the land.
Well, like this system, like so many of our systems that evolve, seems pretty dysfunctional, at least to me from an outsider. I don't want to pretend to be a farmer. But we've seen these the crops emerge where we have a rotation of corn and soy, which is facilitated through petroleum-based fertilizers, pesticides, because the monoculture
genetically modified
seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is based upon a government policy that's essentially catering to and facilitating the development of larger and larger farms, corporate owned farms. They pretend to be family farms, but
right.
they're not. They're really just corporately owned large entities. And in fact, the statistic I saw was since 1995, 75% of all of the government subsidies to farms have gone to the top 10% of the larger farms. So it really is a corporate subsidy.
Yeah, because corporations lobby the government.
Sure.
So here's the latest, just to prove your point, is that last week...
I like my points to be proven.
Okay, well, they aren't always provable, but this
Not
one...
by me, usually.
This is provable, is that last week, Sonny Perdue, who is the Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. Perdue from Georgia, the chicken guy, he announced that the U.S. Department of Agriculture was going to receive from the government $16 billion, which would go into the Treasury. So I don't know if agriculture will ever see that money, but it's going to go towards trade policy and financial market bailout to be used county by county to purchase surplus food commodities and to give purchasing power to food banks. Now, if that is not welfare and socialized food, I don't know what is. And then the last bit is $100 million is going to go towards paying to develop new export overseas markets through marketing. So which small farmer in that group, we could probably find no names of small farmers that are ever going to see a dime of that $16 billion, and I repeat, it is B as in billion dollars. Every dime of that is going to go to big corporations, really big corporations like Tyson Chicken, and I don't know what, I don't buy those things anymore, so I don't know all the brand names. But it's really sad because if we took that $16 billion and we said, look, we're not going to bail out the globalization of agriculture in this country where we send apples to England to be washed and then they get shipped back and we sell them. That's just the most asinine, incredible, unsustainable thing possible.
We should be sending them to Spain for sure.
Okay, well, no, we shouldn't be sending them anywhere. We have people down the street that could have a job and wash apples. But the reality is that until we say we are going to stop underwriting and providing welfare and charity to these big corporations, we are not going to be able to sustain our economy or our life. This is the problem. And so it's all going to fall apart. Well, lots of it is already fallen apart. Clearly, $16 billion. The corporations didn't get enough money the last few years. And now Mr. Trump's China policy with tariffs is sending the farmers who voted for this administration into panic. Absolute panic. I see it, you know.
Well, one of the byproducts of promoting like the systems that we have, again, that are all focused on corn and soy rotation is it takes very specialized equipment. And as you pointed out, some of this equipment is hugely expensive. So if I'm a farmer and I've decided to buy into the whole I'm going to grow corn and I'm going to grow soy, and I've invested $2 million in equipment for my farm, it's not an option to say, all right, you know, the whole corn industry just isn't working for me. Let's plant asparagus instead. Because once you buy into it, you're locked into it.
Well, into the debt, into the fact that maybe it was your family farm or you own many farms. But here's the statistic that proves everything we're saying. For that $4.69 box of cereal, that farmer is going to get 5 cents, a nickel. And it just makes me angry to just even think about that.
All right. Well, if you're angry, just let me tell you, you're listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke, reminding you it is indeed, Annie, the end of the world as we know it.
And in this topic, thank God.
Thank God. So what we're saying is this system that's developed really, again, from the 1930s, the 1940s, the post-World War II economy of taking what was a system that worked for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, the agrarian system, and turning it into using an industrial model. And that industrial model works to a point, and then it's starting to break down. If it's not,
it's already broken.
It's already broken down. We could argue that it is broken down because it's on welfare. It cannot sustain itself, and isn't the definition of a model that should be sustainable is one that
it's got to take care of itself.
Sustainable.
That's right.
So if government has to step in with subsidies and programs to prop this system up, then there's something wrong with that system.
Right. Well, and the challenge is that we've got this myth that we're going to feed everybody. And the truth is we can feed everybody. but we have a bad distribution
Well,
system.
speaking of that, the myth, you hear this all the time, right? Well, that's all fine for you tree huggers out there to say you don't like big ag, but it's big ag that's feeding the world. And that's really not the
true.
case. It's not the case. I mean, big ag exports a lot of food.
Yeah.
But that food is going to other industrialized wealthy countries.
Yes.
In fact, only about 1% of America's exports of food go to countries that we would consider to be impoverished. So, yeah, we're feeding Canada, we're feeding Japan, we're feeding Western
sending
Europe.
that 1%, and we're screwing up their food system too.
Yeah, but at least we're trying.
So here's the thing: these are our tax dollars. We're paying taxes to do this to our country. Basically, we're giving all this welfare to these corporations. And I saw this headline by this guy that writes for different farm publications, and he said, "I want to pay taxes like a general, like General Foods, General Mills, General Motors." And I had to laugh because if we all paid taxes that way, it would be amazing. It would just be we'd all be really in a balanced budget situation. Mm-hmm. And I just keep thinking about where is all this going to go? So I got upset when we talked about this initially because it's so frustrating. And I thought, well, let's talk just a little bit about what kinds of programs that are out there for farm producers. Again, that's the USDA name for those of us who are trying to be farmers in some form or fashion. So there are a few branches of the USDA, and you can go to usda.gov, G-O-V, and look up all the things I'm talking about. They've got a digital radio station. They have a digital news every day. I get an email every day.
I'm sure they'll be playing this program.
They have also a lot of information about loans and microloans. Their microloans are financing small beginning farmers, niche and non-traditional farm operations like truck farms and direct marketing and sales for farmers markets, CSAs, restaurants. They're also focusing on aquaponics and organic and some alternative kinds of growing methods. So they're looking at how to finance those and help people at a very small interest rate. And so those things are fine. They also have crop insurance. So if your crop fails.
Are these designed for the smaller farmers as well?
I can't answer that because I've never seen a small farmer go after. I have
Their
seen
crop
small
insurance
farms.
Is basically let's tend our plants. And
That's right, and do well with less land and more production. I haven't seen anything. I've not seen 1 to 9 acre farms working on this, but I will say that I think some of the microloans are going in the right direction to encourage people. But the insurance stuff, that's just really wonky to me. It's like a scam thing, and I guess, get in trouble for saying that. But it really is a lot of farm producers understand how to play the game with the crop insurance, and it's pretty wicked. And they end up paying out, $250 and getting $80,000 because they can show they lost so many tomatoes and so many peppers. Well, those of us who grow food know you're going to have loss. It's just the reality between animals, insects, and the weather, and the fact that you lost a certain percentage, but you planted 80,000 plants. Well, that doesn't compute. Anyway.
Are you seeing that sometimes they make more money through insurance claims than they would have had they harvested the crop and sold it?
It's hard to know because I don't always see the budget part of it, like what they made from the crops. We can see the production numbers, but I can't see the other part of it. So, and I will say that the government is trying to work harder to reach what they call underserved. So USDA is looking at veterans, and they have some special programs for veterans, but also the underserved are defined as women. So that's good. Minorities, and so they have a large list of minorities, and that they have specially designed programs that try to support like new farmers and young farmers. And then in some cases, they waive the fees for the underserved for different programs that they do. There's also Targeted Farm Loan Program. This is a new program that has youth loans and, again, minority and women farm and rancher loans, beginning farmer and rancher loans, plus programs. They have some really good things online where people can go and look up information and basic business plans. And again, this is all either at USDA.gov or at the FSA, which is Farm Service Agency. That's your local branch of the USDA. So if you wanted to go to their site, it would be F as in Frank, S as in Sam, A.USDA.gov. There's also within the USDA a group called the National Resource Conservation Service, which is referred to as NRCS. There are all these acronyms. And they have grants for matching grants, so you have to put a certain percentage of the cost into fencing and water collection and a variety of other expansion of pastures and things like that. They also have conservation programs. All of these things are listed online. So it isn't...
But are these new programs, are they, again, I keep going back to the small farmers, are the small farmers going to take advantage of these, or is this just another way of channeling money into the large corporate, better funded farms?
Right. So I think that the NRCS has a lot of programs that really do help the small farmer, that person that's under the 441 acres or the 1 to 9 acre programs. They have some special exceptions for that small of a farm operation. And so I do think, like in rural development, they have a lot of programs for community development in rural areas and small villages and things like that. They told me that they actually have some grants that don't even get applied for. So it's not that there aren't good things happening. It's just that the monoculture is taking control. And I know you have a statistic on the percentage.
Oh, we have lots of statistics. But
that 75% of all these federal subsidies have gone to 10% of the farms. So this is not good.
Well, a lot of we think of big ag as producing food, but a lot of the programs that are out there are producing crops that don't go directly to food. I mean, it's ethanol production through corn. There's all the corn fructose
high
stuff,
fructose corn
and
syrup.
the feed stock for meat production. So it's not like that the corn and the soy is being consumed in its form as food. It has to
be dealt with. It has to be treated in order for it to be a product.
Essentially, it has to be mined
or produced. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the percentage is of what's being exported, but it's unbelievable. And then we're turning around and import some of these crops, which absolutely makes no sense to me at all.
Getting back to what we were talking about, where the argument is always, these systems are more efficient, these systems are more profitable.
Well, that's a marketing strategy.
Yeah, these systems are feeding the world. But the studies have shown that actually small farms that use diversified crops, like what we would think about as a traditional, well, when we say traditional, that's always, the old picture of Aunt Em on the family farm, of diversified products, are actually producing twice as much food per acre as the monoculture.
Well, let me say, too, that smaller farms, those 1 to 9 acre people, are growing food for other people, and they're also growing food for themselves. And this is a totally different system than the monoculture or the factory farm or the corporate farm. For example, corporate farms, the people that raise these crops have certain quotas, and they have certain instructions about what gets sprayed and what doesn't get sprayed. I mean, they are working down through a list of what they have to do. It's like a no-brainer thing.
Well, and they get into long-term contracts about seeds because their seeds can't be reused. They can't use
collect seeds.
Genetically modified seeds. They get into, of course, the loan payment. They can't set their own prices. They're completely dictated to by the markets. So it really is a discouraging lifestyle, I would think, because you get into the idea of farming and say, I want to be my own boss. I want to be out there producing. I want to, control my own destiny. And then you get co-opted into a system that absolutely puts you into, you're punching a time clock and you're loading 16 tons, and every day you get deeper in debt. It's a discouraging system for those involved.
Well, and people work hard and they work long hours and they have injuries and they worry about if they're going to be able to hang on to the family farm, which doesn't look anything like it did when it started.
Sure.
We just had an experience with one of our interns watching the documentary King Corn. And I think, and he was shocked, just absolutely shocked by the film. And granted, some of it talks about the USDA, which isn't completely accurate in how it works right now, but it's the same system now. It just is called something else, where the farmer actually only makes the money through the end where they collect insurance or they collect some kind of payment. Mm-hmm. And it shows what happens with the corn and that it's not really a product until it's processed in some way. And I think we don't understand what we're eating.
Well, I would say that the system, we're not going to change the system overnight. But how are we going to change the system over the long term? Because we've kind of gone to the Debbie Downer kind of thing of the system is broken, feels discouraging, feels hopeless. You know, the government is all set up the corporation to cater to the corporation. So, all right, we know that.
All right, but here's
let's
the deal.
Fix it.
That's right. This is not fixable. This is already.
So let's throw it out and let's go to something else.
Down. It's fallen down. It's not even on the decline. It's finished. We're just pretending it still is working. Mm-hmm. And so where we're going, one word, it's just in one word. And we talk about it every program, and it's local. We are going local. And so we're not going to feed the rest of the world. You know, we're not. We're going to feed ourselves, and we're going to feed ourselves good food from people we know. Neighbors. That's right. We're going to feed ourselves. We're going to buy food from other people that we know. We're not going to be eating plastic strings in our meat and fish and our water. We're going to eat healthy food, and we're going to do it with great glee together. We're going to share food. We're going to share the responsibilities. And if that's socialism, then good, because $16 billion to the USDA is socialism in the form they're sending it.
I know. Well, you're using that term as a derogatory term, but basically our current system is at its core corporate socialism.
Well, it's more than that. It's fascism. Let's be honest about what it is.
Let's just throw out some more isms.
That's
here.
Right. But I'm not saying socialism. I'm being sarcastic because I believe that we have to do better at working together and supporting each other, and that everything has to fall apart, and it's going to be hard on people as it becomes more and more clear. I mean, the packages are getting smaller, the prices are higher, the quality makes us sick, the food itself makes us sick. Why do we have such a big medical industry? It's because we're sick from the food we're eating. It's food that the cattle get sick from.
Well, fortunately, we have now options. If people, and this is something you can fix for yourself. You do have options, and you can make those choices. Most people do, not everyone. But.
Yeah, well, we don't always have access because we don't. So when I went to school, which is, older than dirt, I learned home economics. And without that kind of knowledge from the beginning, we don't have the knowledge to be able to make some of this transition. So we got a lot of things we can do. We'll talk about it in another episode.
Okay. Well, you have been listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. We want to thank our Emmy Award-winning producer, Adam Rich, sitting behind the glass over there.
Who's wearing a cute hat today.
Wearing a cute hat. He's cute every day. And thank you for spending just a little bit of time with us. And as your grandmother and probably Adam now says, the secret to a happy and sustainable life is...
play nice with others, clean up your own mess. And Jay, I wish to heaven you'd eat your vegetables.
Grown locally.
Yes.
Till next time.
Mother Earth will sing and her children will be healed. Come on, see the morning glory blossom in the night. You know the stars are dancing in twilight. Soon we'll be together, all will be revealed. Mother Earth will sing and her children will be healed.
You can find more information on living sustainably in our unsustainable world at bluerockstation.com.